what do you think of just the overall media business model today?
Well, you and I are talking at a crazy time because this is some of the biggest biggest media layoffs that I've ever seen. We can talk about tech layoffs too. But that's a different story. Right now, we have basically every legacy media company on top of the digital darlings of the 2010s basically going up in flames. We've seen Vice. I mean, that really was the poster child of the new era, the go big, the sign all the deals. Unfortunately, I think for a variety of ideological and business reasons that it didn't end up working out for them. BuzzFeed, obviously, basically going to zero in terms of their stock, firing the vast majority of their news team. Business Insider, really the only one that continues to kick, and that's frankly, backstopped by a multi-billion-dollar holding company. So the major lesson that I take away is that advertising first, specifically web advertising-based companies alone, did not make it. And that was a huge bet of the 2010s. If we think about the legacy media companies that did last through, we have the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. Even the Washington Post, by the way, not doing so well. But a huge portion of the three of those legacy media businesses remains their direct subscription. So I think that what people like me have been able to do quite successfully, as well as a lot of other people in the Substack realm, et cetera, is they have been able to apply the same principle and create the same three-legged stool of revenue that the old companies did. The ones who didn't survive were the ones who frankly just had one leg. Like if you'll recall back in the 2010s, people were going all in on Facebook traffic or many other things that could easily change, and they got decimated for it. Bustle, I could name a bunch of these off the top of my head. And fundamentally, it was just bad business. So it made some money in the interim, but they made long-term plans. And I think it was actually a huge disgrace or disservice to a lot of their employees because they didn't just do basic math about how CPMs can and often do change and didn't make, prudent decisions in the interim.
What do you think? Because if you think of ones that did do well, if you think of Politico or Axios, those guys did well, and then you see these other ones that you mentioned that didn't do well. Is it just obviously they both had good reporting. They both had other. So is it just one just had smarter business people, or how do you? What's the?
Here's what everybody
takeaway?
forgets. Here's what everybody forgets about Politico and Axios. Politico and Axios are event companies that also make money through news. And that's what nobody really knows unless you really are in the nitty gritty here in Washington.
Okay, so events is a huge driver.
Is a massive driver. So next time you pay attention to Mike Allen's little Axios conference and it's sponsored by Bank of America, now you understand how Axios makes money and how it got to a $500 million valuation. Politico, when it does Politico Playbook, what does it say up there at the top? It says sponsored by Amazon, sponsored by Facebook. And the reason why is specifically not to get the clicks. It's because a very, very niche but high value newsletter audience tunes into that newsletter every single day. And so for Northrop Grumman, Amazon, bingo, Hill staffers, lobbyists, it's the easiest way to get your eyeballs in front of your direct customer. It's kind of like if you live here in DC, when you get off at the Pentagon, there are all of these ads for defense companies. And it sounds crazy, but it's true. They literally buy ad space in the metro stop when you get off at the Pentagon, which is kind of nuts. Same thing whenever you get off at the Capitol. You see all of this, advertising for defense companies, for enterprise software, government application software. So I honestly count out Politico, Axios, and Punchbowl because, in my opinion, they're trade news. They're trade publications. And that's a very, very different business model. And I honestly put that to aside from
they're more like a B2B trade. It's just if you would have it on, mortgage-backed securities or whatever, and you're writing to bankers. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And when we think about so I have some friends that have their own, let's say, Substack types of things, podcasts. They have a lot of subscribers, but they are one of the things that they complain about with the subscribers is that they are they tend to get more subscribers when they make their stories juicier, especially when they use a lot of red meat in their things And when they make more nuanced stuff, sometimes they lose subscribers. They certainly don't gain them. And so it starts to like incent them to kind of act in a way that they don't want to act because they can literally see the dollars come in from that. Like, how do you think about it?
Comes back to the three-legged stool. And it's exactly why you should never have just a single source of revenue. So my critique of a lot of people who go all in on Substack is that, as you just said, they're 100% reliant on their subscription business. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that, that I don't need my subscription business. I definitely do. But I've also got pretty thriving YouTube channel, as you mentioned, which is relatively independent of that. We do get, some revenue off of that. Not a lot, not enough to pay the bills, but some. And then we also get ads from our podcast, from, CPMs that we're able to get there. So when you have any 1-3 that is able to prop you up, if you take a temporary hit, as you said, in one area, so be it. That's what building a resilient business is like. So I always advise people, you need multiple streams of rev. You cannot just have a single source, because when you do, you are definitely victim to that mindset and to that incentive. And, everything that I'm saying sounds obvious, but it's all in the execution. It's very hard to do. It's hard to get millions of people to watch something or to download something and to pay you for something, and combine all three of those things. I mean, people who see me outwardly probably think of me as a news personality, but, to be honest with you, I spend just as much time on my business as I do actually on the news. And that's another thing I always tell people is, hey, if you're going independent and you're a news person, you better know like the basics of small business ownership, because it's not for everybody. It's not fun sometimes, as you know, Auren, like running a business is a pain in the ass very often.
And you're like, Breaking Points now gets more viewers than most major TV network news and cable news. But I imagine your costs are like anywhere between 95 and 98% lower than those guys.
Yeah.
Like,
probably
what does it mean
99%.
for the
Yeah.
maybe. Like, what does it mean for the future of these like TV news business model?
Unfortunately for them, look, and I actually respect the original creators. That's what a lot of people don't understand. I hate cable news as it is currently, but when you start something, you should always go look at the prior generation and the real innovators. So before starting Breaking Points, I read every book I could get my hands on about Ted Turner and Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes and all of the fathers of the cable news business model. And the single genius that they had was to exploit the analog cable system and subscriber-based fees. And what that meant is that at that time in the late 80s and the early 90s is that the cable companies themselves had effectively a monopolistic access to your living room. And so they would pay other channels to be a part of their bundle, because it was one of the reasons that you would pay the cable company. Well, to this day, the legacy cable fees are the only reason that any of these television companies are in business. So, for example, CNN, last year, they probably on an average primetime day, I'm not kidding when I say this, probably get a third of the number of people that will watch Breaking Points, which is insane. Like when you were to describe that thing. That's crazy. But it doesn't matter, because they still made $1 billion in profit last year from the cable carriage fees. Their advertising business is
have to
nothing.
go away. That is unsustainable. Right. At some point, like it will. I mean, I guess people have been predicting will go away for a lot longer than it has. Right?
It's a 7-year thing, Auren. It's 7 years. I mean, they've got years left on these deals. They're going to squeeze billions and billions and billions of dollars out of them in the interim. And listen, do I think they're going to last? No, not in the current form at all. I think they're all dinosaurs, and I think that we are going to see mass firings at every single one of them. But that could take a decade.